I still remember the excitement when my dad told me we were going on a mountain trip. It wasn't just about the hike, it was about Peter, his friend. The same Peter I hadn't seen since I was 18. Back then, I admired him, though in a more innocent way. He had that rugged charm, a deep, hearty laugh, and an easy confidence that always drew people in. But now, things were different. I was different. I had come into my own, discovered who I truly was. I was gay, something I hadn't been ready to confront when I last saw him. But now, at 22, it felt like everything was aligning in some strange way. I had been out for a while, comfortable with myself, and suddenly, there was this opportunity to spend time with Peter, a man I had always secretly admired. I couldn't believe I had the chance to spend time with him again, this time as an adult. And not just any trip, but a mountain hike, just the three of us. Me, my father, and Peter. The idea felt like an adventure in more ways than one. I remember the car ride up the mountain was filled with light conversation, mostly between my dad and Peter, catching up on old times. I sat in the back, occasionally chiming in, but mostly just enjoying the sound of Peter's voice, the way he laughed, the way his eyes crinkled at the edges when he smiled. It was strange how much I noticed these little things now. Back then, at 18, it was admiration, maybe even a bit of envy, but now it was something entirely different. It was attraction. A powerful one. The closer we got to the trail, the more I found myself stealing glances at him, my mind racing with thoughts I hadn't allowed myself to have before. When we arrived at the base of the trail, the air was crisp, fresh with the scent of pine and earth. The idea of hiking through such beautiful scenery felt almost poetic, getting lost in nature in the company of Peter. I was more than ready for this trip. The terrain got steeper, and after what must have been 7 kilometers, we reached a small clearing where we decided to take a break. I was winded but exhilarated, my legs burning from the climb. My dad, always in shape, sat down with a content sigh, pulling out a bottle of water. Peter, though, was different. He didn't just sit. He stood for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow, and then without warning, he grabbed the hem of his shirt and peeled it off in one smooth motion. And just like that, my entire world tilted. It felt like time slowed as Peter tossed his shirt onto the ground, revealing the full extent of his body. I had known he was fit. His broad shoulders and defined arms were impossible to miss even under a t-shirt. But seeing him bare-chested was something else entirely. His chest was sculpted, muscles well-defined but not overly so, just the perfect balance of strength and elegance. His skin, lightly tanned from the sun, glistened with a thin sheen of sweat. I could see the way his muscles rippled with even the smallest movement, the curve of his biceps, the flat planes of his abs. It was distracting. No, it was intoxicating. He took his shirt, now damp with sweat, and casually wrung it out, squeezing the moisture from it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But to me, it wasn't natural, it was pure tension. My eyes followed the droplets of sweat as they fell from the fabric, splashing onto the ground. There was something so raw, so primal about the sight of it. I could feel my heart racing, my mouth suddenly dry, and it wasn't from the hike. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible. The way his muscles flexed, the way his body moved, it was like watching a scene from a movie, but this was real, and it was happening right in front of me. It was hard to focus on anything else after that. Even as we rested, sipping water and catching our breath, my mind kept wandering back to the side of him, shirtless, glistening in the sunlight, every inch of him a testament to years of hard work and discipline. My body felt alive with tension, a tension I wasn't sure how to handle. I could only hope that Peter didn't notice, but part of me wondered if he had. After our break, we packed up and kept moving, the trail growing narrower as we climbed higher into the mountains. The conversation flowed easily, my dad leading most of it, but Peter and I exchanged small, lingering glances that seemed to say more than words ever could. There was something different in the air, or maybe it was just in my head, but every step felt charged with a kind of electricity I hadn't expected. The plan was to camp overnight, a simple setup with tents and a small fire. By the time we reached a suitable clearing, the sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the ground. The temperature had dropped just enough to make the warmth of the campfire feel comforting. My dad and I worked together to get the fire going while Peter started setting up the tents. It was supposed to be straightforward. My dad had his tent, I had mine, and Peter had brought his own. But after several minutes of trying to get his tent up, Peter cursed under his breath and stepped back, hands on his hips, looking frustrated. The tent just wasn't cooperating. One of the poles was bent, or maybe the fabric had stretched over time. Either way, it was clear that it wasn't going to stand properly no matter what we did. My dad, ever practical, shrugged it off, suggesting that Peter could either sleep under the stars or share with one of us. I could feel my pulse quicken. The thought of Peter sharing my tent, being that close to him, made my stomach tighten with anticipation. Without hesitating, I offered to share mine. It wasn't that big of a tent, but it would be enough for 2 people if we didn't mind being close. And I didn't mind. Not one bit. My dad, blissfully unaware of the tension building between Peter and me, agreed and went about setting up his own space for the night. As the fire crackled and the night settled in around us, the air cooled even more. We ate a simple meal, mostly in silence now, the conversation having slowed as the day's hike caught up with us. My dad retired to his tent early, saying something about an early start for the next leg of the trip. I watched him zip up his tent, his snores starting almost immediately, leaving Peter and me alone by the fire. The quiet between us wasn't awkward, but it was heavy, like there was something unspoken hanging in the air. I could feel the weight of Peter's presence beside me, his body relaxed but still commanding attention. Eventually, we both decided to call it a night. As we crawled into my small tent, the space between us felt smaller than it was. It was tight, sure, but the proximity made every movement feel amplified. Our legs brushed against each other as we got situated, the warmth of his body radiating through the thin layers of fabric between us. Lying there in the dark, the only sounds were the distant rustle of leaves, the occasional pop of the dying fire outside, and my dad's soft snoring just a few meters away. It felt surreal, almost like a dream, being so close to Peter in this tiny tent, away from everything. And then he broke the silence. In that deep, relaxed tone of his, he made a light-hearted joke about whether I had a fiancé waiting for me back home. It was the kind of thing people say without thinking, just idle conversation to pass the time, but for me, it was the perfect opening. I don't know what came over me, but I just said it. I told him that there wasn't a fiancé. There wasn't even a girlfriend. There wasn't ever going to be one. I was gay. The words came out smoother than I expected, as if I had been waiting for the chance to tell him, to say it out loud in his presence. And for a split second, I felt that familiar rush of nerves, the same nerves I had felt the first time I came out to someone. But Peter didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. In fact, his response floored me. He told me that he was gay too, that he had been for the last 5 years. Hearing him say those words, lying there in the dark with nothing but the sound of our breathing, sent a shockwave through me. It was like the world had shifted. Suddenly, everything made sense. The tension, the glances, the way I had felt around him. But before I could even fully process it, things escalated. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. I don't even remember how it started, but I found myself reaching over, my hand slipping down his body, feeling the firmness of his muscles beneath my fingers. There was a moment where it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to just the 2 of us in that small, enclosed space, the air thick with the unspoken desire that had been building all day. My hand moved lower, and I could feel his breath hitch, the sharp intake of air that told me everything I needed to know. I pushed my hand into his pants, feeling the heat of him, the way his body responded to my touch. Peter's breathing grew heavier, more ragged, but he stayed quiet, even though I could sense the intensity of his reaction. My dad's snores continued from his tent, oblivious to everything happening just 2 meters away. It was surreal, this quiet, stolen moment with Peter, the man I had admired for so long, now so close, so vulnerable. I don't know how long it lasted, but time felt irrelevant. All I could focus on was Peter's breathing, the way his body reacted under my hand, the way the tension between us finally broke. And when it was over, we lay there in the dark, the space between us filled with an unspoken understanding. There was no need for words. We both knew what had just happened. And somehow, it felt like it was exactly what was supposed to happen. The next morning, we acted like nothing had happened. I woke up with the first light, still a little buzzed from the night before, but Peter was already up, moving around like everything was normal. He gave me a quick glance, a small smile, nothing more. My dad was still snoring in his tent, completely oblivious, which I guess was a blessing. For a moment, I wondered if last night had even been real, or if it was some crazy dream. But it was real. I could still feel the weight of it, the adrenaline, the tension. We packed up camp and hit the trail again, the three of us, just like before. My dad was chatting away, talking about how great the weather was, how perfect the views were. I nodded along, made the right noises, but my mind was somewhere else. Every time I glanced at Peter, my heart would speed up a little. I didn't know how he felt about what had happened. Was it a one-time thing? Did it mean something more? But he was cool, calm, like he hadn't been with me in that tent last night, like I hadn't had my hand down his pants, feeling him tense under my touch. We covered another stretch of the trail, stopping once to rest, and I couldn't help but steal a glance at Peter when my dad wasn't looking. He caught my eye, and there was something in his expression, a flicker of something unspoken, just for a second. It was enough. I knew we were on the same page. We both knew we had another night ahead of us, and I had a feeling things weren't going to end with just what happened last night. As the day wore on, my anticipation built. The idea of spending another night together, this time knowing what we both wanted, it was driving me crazy. By the time we set up camp for the second night, I was practically buzzing with it. My dad, still blissfully unaware, set up his tent, talking about how we'd finish the hike the next day. He didn't notice the way Peter and I kept avoiding each other's gaze. Or maybe he just chalked it up to exhaustion from the hike. Either way, it was better for us. That night, after we ate and my dad crawled into his tent to sleep, I waited. I couldn't relax, not really, knowing that Peter was just a few feet away. I kept listening to the sounds of the night, the wind through the trees, the crackling of the dying fire, and my dad's snoring, which thankfully started up pretty quickly. I don't even know how long I waited, but it felt like hours. Every little noise seemed louder in the quiet, every rustle of the leaves seemed to echo. And then, finally, Peter came. I felt him unzip the tent, and there he was, his shadow blocking the faint light from outside. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just slipped inside, quiet and smooth, like we were picking up exactly where we left off the night before. My heart raced as he knelt beside me, his body brushing against mine in the cramped space. He gave me this look, something between a smirk and a promise, and I knew exactly what was coming next. Without a word, he tugged at my pants, pulling them down just enough. The cool air hit my skin for a second, but then Peter's warm hands were on me, and I forgot about everything else. It was surreal, the way he moved so confidently, so sure of what he was doing. His mouth followed, and the warmth of it, the sensation, sent a shockwave through my entire body. My dad's snores were still loud in the background, just 2 meters away, but it might as well have been miles. Peter took his time, like he was savoring every second. It was almost overwhelming, the way my body reacted, how I had to bite my lip to keep from making any noise. Every part of me was buzzing, alive with the feeling of him. I could barely breathe, let alone think. I was just lost in the moment, in the heat of him, in the way it felt so right, even though it was risky as hell. When it was over, he pulled back, his breath ragged but still controlled, like he had done this a million times before. He gave me a quick grin, then slipped out of the tent just as quietly as he had come in. I lay there for a long time, my heart still pounding, my body still thrumming with energy. It was insane. I was lying there, my dad snoring in the next tent over, while I just had one of the most intense experiences of my life. The next day came too fast. We packed up camp early, the sky still a pale blue as the sun started to climb over the horizon. It felt strange, after everything that had happened in the last 2 nights, to be going through the motions of a regular morning routine, as if nothing had changed. My dad was in a great mood, cracking jokes, making plans for the next trip, completely oblivious to the shift that had happened between Peter and me. And Peter. He was playing it cool, the same easygoing, relaxed guy he always was. You'd never guess that just hours ago, he had been on his knees in my tent. As we headed down the trail, the descent was easier than the climb had been, but it felt lumpy somehow. Maybe it was because I knew the trip was ending. Part of me was relieved. I needed time to process what had happened, to figure out what it all meant. But another part of me didn't want it to end. I wasn't ready to go back to normal life, where Peter would just be my dad's friend again, not this magnetic, handsome guy who had shared something so intimate with me. We didn't talk much during the hike back. My dad, as usual, was the one filling the silence with chatter, but Peter and I stayed mostly quiet. There was a tension between us, but not the bad kind. It was like we both knew that we had crossed a line, and now we were on the other side of it. But we didn't know what came next. By the time we reached the bottom of the mountain, the parking lot felt almost surreal. After 2 days of being up in the mountains, surrounded by nature and caught up in everything that had happened, it was jarring to be back among other people, back to reality. My dad suggested we grab some food in the nearby town before heading home, and Peter agreed, his voice as casual as ever. Meanwhile, my mind was spinning. Sitting in the diner, everything felt normal. Too normal, given the circumstances. Peter and I sat across from each other, and for a moment, it felt like the last 2 nights were some kind of fever dream. Like maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But then he'd glance at me, just a quick flicker of the eyes, almost like a secret signal. And I'd feel that spark again. That reminder that no, it had all been real. I wasn't crazy. After lunch, we piled back into the car for the drive home. My dad and Peter talked in the front, the radio playing low in the background, but I barely listened. My mind was already racing ahead, thinking about what would happen next. Was this just a one-time thing? Something that happened in the mountains, in the heat of the moment, and would be left behind once we were back to reality? Or was it more than that? When we finally pulled up to my dad's house, Peter didn't linger. He and my dad exchanged the usual friendly goodbyes, plans to grab a drink next week, that sort of thing. Then Peter turned to me. There wasn't much he could say with my dad standing right there, but his eyes locked with mine for a second, and in that brief moment, I knew this wasn't over. There was more to come. And then he was gone, driving off down the street, leaving me standing there with my dad, feeling like my world had just shifted in a way I couldn't quite explain yet. It wasn't until a few weeks later that Peter and I really started seeing each other. At first, it was under the guise of hanging out, my dad's friend stopping by, grabbing a coffee, catching a game on TV. But each time, we found ourselves alone, and it wasn't long before things picked up right where they left off. It was electric, this connection between us. I couldn't get enough of him, the way he made me feel, the way being around him just felt right. And now? Well, now I'm 22 years old, and I'm dating a 42-year-old man. We have perfect sex. A man who just so happens to be my dad's best friend. It's crazy when I think about it, but it works. We work. It's not some wild fling or a forbidden romance that's doomed to end in disaster. It's real. It's steady, and somehow my dad still hasn't caught on. We're careful, obviously, but sometimes I wonder how long we can keep it up. But for now, I'm happy. Happier than I've been in a long time.